When it comes to groceries, I'm always overambitious and think I'm going to be awesome and cook regularly throughout the week. That is not the case.
Hungry Root is perfect because it's your own personal shopper, so they take care of your weekly grocery shopping, recommending healthy groceries tailored to your taste, nutrition preferences, health goals, which makes cooking so much easier for you, Amy.
When I shop for my Hungry Root box every week, I look at my schedule and determine how much I'm willing to cook and how much I need pre-prepared, and always make sure to check the time those recipes take to make.
I love Hungry Root so much because they make it easy to eat high-quality, nutritious food and achieve any diet or health goals, from anti-inflammatory to gut-friendly, gluten-free, or dairy-free, high-protein, and more.
What I love is the automation of this. You can tell Hungry Root what your preferences are, and they fill your cart, and you can make substitutions as you go, and it learns with every box that you fill.
You're going to love Hungry Root as much as we do. Take advantage of this exclusive offer. For a limited time, get 40% off your first box, plus get a free item in every box for life.
Go to hungryroot.com/booktalk, BOOKTALK, and use the code BOOKTALK. That's hungryroot.com/booktalk. And use the code BOOKTALK to get 40% off your first box and a free item of your choice for life.
hungryroot.com/booktalk. Code BOOKTALK, BOOKTALK.
At T-Mobile, our critical mission is providing unparalleled 5G coverage for when connectivity is mission critical. Introducing T-Priority, America's best 5G network experience for first responders, even in times of congestion. More capacity, faster speeds, better coverage. T-Priority from T-Mobile, built for tomorrow's emergencies, ready today. Discover more at t-priority.com.
For qualifying organizations on eligible rate plans, coverage not available in some areas and may be impacted by emergencies.
My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
Following her morning of gifts from Dorian, Selena joins the rest of the court at Temple in celebration of Yulmus. A child dressed like Diana gifts the assassin with a gold arrow despite Selena's wishes to be ignored. That evening, Selena dresses with Philippa's help and crashes the Yulmus ball, much to Kale's chagrin and Dorian's pleasure. When it's clear Nehemia will not become the source of trouble for the evening, the assassin and the prince dance the night away and end the magical evening with a kiss. Certain another champion will be killed, Selena goes hunting in the passages only to find Cain and his otherworldly monster.
Hi there! We're Book Talk for Book Talk with Jac and Amy, your book besties who take the novels you love seriously.
This is Jac.
And I'm Amy.
We embrace and respect modern fantasy, romance, romantasy books written by women, and so it is in our nature to analyze these books as we would any other novel we might have dissected in school.
With our combined 13 years of literary academic training, we use our education to analyze and give voice to reasons you may love or hate today's popular books.
This is part 1 of this week's episode, where we're discussing chapters 37 through 43 of Sarah J. Maas's debut novel, Throne of Glass. For a complete list of episodes and chapter breakdowns, be sure to visit our Instagram at the handle Book Talk for Book Talk. This week, we're discussing chapters 37 through 43 of Sarah J. Maas's debut novel, Throne of Glass. For a complete list of episodes and chapter breakdowns, be sure to check out our Instagram at the handle Book Talk for Book Talk.
Before we dive in, let's talk about Spilt. Spoilers, perspective and interpretation, language, and themes.
Spoilers. While our discussion is about Throne of Glass, important context from the first 3 novels in the series will be discussed without spoiler warning. This is specifically Throne of Glass, Crown of Midnight, and Heir of Fire. This is not a read-along for anyone who hasn't read at least these 3 books, and you will be spoiled from here on out. So please take this as your only spoiler warning. For all those other spoilers beyond Heir of Fire and other SJM works, we will keep those to the breadcrumbs and broomsticks area at the end of the episode.
Perspective and interpretation. What we discuss in this episode are strictly our personal interpretation of the text. We do not speak for Sarah J. Maas and in no way know her intentions for her books or characters. We also know our listeners have their own personal views and opinions, and we encourage you to share your thoughts with us because every perspective and interpretation is worth exploring.
Language. Even though I try to keep my swearing at a minimum for the sake of my mother, explicit language does occur. And as I've been editing, you do not curse as much.
I've been working on it.
Okay.
Themes. We also discuss some heavy themes throughout the podcast that can include themes of sex, violence, abuse, depression, self-harm, and death. While we will do our best to give trigger warnings for the darker themes, we will discuss these topics when they are important to the text. Listener discretion is advised.
As always, we love keeping the conversation going because our listeners are so good at finding things we've overlooked or missed completely. You can share your interpretations of the text with us by posting on social media, tagging us in stories, sending us DMs, or submitting to the forum on our website. We also post more exclusive content and host live streams for our Patreon supporters. You can find us at patreon.com/Book Talk for Book Talk. Each week we ask ourselves a question, and this week we ask, using literary lenses, which of the two males in Selena's life are a better fit for her? I'm excited for this one because we're going to debate both sides.
Themes we see in this section include healing, dreams, and the power of names. In previous episodes, we've seen how Selena's perception of her surroundings have changed. And I bring that up because of Selena's red teeth. Now, last week, Selena woke up Yulmus morning to a bag of candy, ate a bunch of it, and her teeth were stained red. So we're now moving into the next part of the day. She's going to temple in chapter 37 to take part in the holiday ritual, which I find interesting because she was denied that opportunity during Samhain. So what has changed?
She was allowed at the temple at Samhain.
Oh, and she did not. She said no. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. So we're now in chapter 37, and she's going to temple with the rest of the court, taking part in the Yulmus holiday ritual, which is interesting because during Samhain, she turned down Kale when he gave her that opportunity. So what has changed that would make her go to temple this time around? And I think it has to do with the symbolism of her teeth. Quote, her teeth were still red. She didn't need anyone else noticing. We've talked a lot this season. Red is the color of Adarlan, of the king and Dorian's kingdom. And for her teeth to be red, for her mouth to be stained red, symbolizes her assimilation into this culture, into Adarlan, and it's only confirmed further by her presence at temple, by participating essentially in court.
Yeah, I love the red teeth and her being in temple because last week we talked about her being compared to a demon several times in the last episode. And here she is now, still a little devil mouth in temple. So I think it means, when you're looking at the symbolism, what does it mean for a demon to enter this temple? Now, I think you can take that in different ways. You know, how is she interacting with people? But then you can also literally look at this as she's a demon or, you know, quote unquote, the enemy entering this glass temple, which we're about to go into, which is a clear representation of the king of Adarlan.
Right, because it's made of glass. Quote, the temple was a beautiful space built entirely from glass. The limestone covering the floor was all that remained of the original stone temple, which the king of Adarlan had destroyed when he decided to replace it with the glass structure. So we can see Selena's presence in two different ways. On one hand, she's appreciating the artifice of Adarlan, the glass structure, despite her earlier abhorrence at the start of the novel. It's almost like she can see the good in the bad, like she can appreciate the good in Dorian and still hate his father and what his father has done. Like Jack said, though, at the same time, it's almost like she's a wolf in sheep's clothing. She's the demon in the temple that's trying to hide. It's a fun way to see how both can be true, I think, right now. Just using red teeth, just stained from candy, one symbol.
Absolutely.
I do find it curious that the king of Adarlan, who we know to be possessed, has all of his structures built of glass. Like, he's destroyed the stone structures. He's built glass structures. And if I think of that symbolically, it's as if he's trying to convince others he has nothing to hide. Like, look at me. I am great. I am perfect. And I have nothing going on behind closed doors.
Yeah. It is so funny how much glass and transparency and light, when you look at it, is really a representation of lies. Like we've talked about this before, where the truth is uncovered with moonlight, and lies and manipulation and something that's, we'll just say, not right is normally in daylight. So you have this building, and she talks about the light and things being very clear going inside of it. So immediately I'm like, oh, that's a big sign for me that lies are happening. Now, Amy's about to say that Kale and Selena are about to be like siblings, but I'm doubling down on Daddy Kale, because that episode went out last week and people were just like, so this is going to hurt my feelings then. That's like, another person was like, they said, I don't want to put them on blast, but they're like, I thought I understood my daddy issues. I didn't realize how much more there was. Anyway, so Kale tells her, quote, "Sit down," Kale growled, pulling her green gown. She made a face and dropped into the cushioned bench. Several people stared at her. It's like a father and their child.
It's true. I can see it. There is a familiarity.
Yeah.
Between these two. Like, Selena falls asleep on Kale's shoulder. Kale also falls asleep. They nag and poke at each other. They tease each other, which is why maybe I picked siblings, because it reminds me of me and my siblings. But it is definitely familial for sure.
Yeah. I think it's I think what's funny is that we describe familial relationships sometimes just mean familial relationships. You know what I mean? Like, the things that you're pointing out, it is like they're kind of buddy, and, we can look at it as very sibling or, father-daughter, but, it's just them becoming more similar to the two, in that they're becoming more mirrored. And I think that we're going to get more of this mirrored similarities between the two as we go on.
During the end of the temple ritual, there's this process where there are 9 children dressed up as the gods, and they enter the temple blindfolded, and they are supposed to wander the pews and pick a random person to give gifts. It's a very, very strange ritual.
I was into it.
I would love to see this in practice.
I would love to get presents.
Well, yeah, that's. I knew when you said you would love to see it that was the goal. The child dressed as, quote, Deanna, goddess of the hunt and maidens, approached. Selena shifted from one foot to the other, wishing she hadn't demanded that Kale give her the aisle seat. To her dread and dismay, the girl stopped before her and removed the blindfold. The girl smiled at Selena and reached to touch the assassin's forehead. Selena's back began sweating as she felt hundreds of eyes upon her. Is it perhaps that in this moment, Selena is worried about someone drawing attention to her? Remember, she's got that red mouth. She's feeling insecure and maybe worried someone will recognize her for who she is.
Totally. I mean, like, the fact that the goddess of the hunt came to her and, she's hunting humans, a lot of that it makes sense. And there's like, this otherworldly fairy situation that just kind of,
right.
I think she's just constantly on edge.
Yeah. And the fact that she gives her a golden arrow is a little bit on the nose.
Right. And then, so I do want to look at the little girl who approaches Selena, though. Quote, "She was a pretty little thing. Her blonde hair hung in loose curls, and her brown eyes were flecked with green. The girl smiled at Selena and reached to touch the assassin's forehead. Selena's back began to sweat, as you were saying. But what I really want to point out is that, this little girl kind of looks like Selena, right? Unique eyes, kind of like flecks with green. And I think that this gold hair, and I think that this is Selena seeing herself in this child. And as I'm reading this, I'm realizing that in the ball, I believe one of the other men, when they're talking to Kale or Dorian, calls her a pretty little thing, or that pretty thing.
So maybe there's some
connection of she's seeing herself in this child.
Yeah.
And the fact that she's seeing herself in this child and is getting nervous about that, I think speaks volumes, especially since we're getting, and again, in the next chapter, she's going to consider herself looking like a princess. So you have this young girl who reminds her of herself when she was a princess, with her looking like a princess.
Yeah. Yeah. It's all connected.
It's all connected.
Now, about the gold arrow that the child gives Selena. Selena thinks, quote, "It couldn't be used, of course, but it was made of solid gold. It'll fetch a nice price." Now, I bring this up because throughout this episode, we're going to see Selena default to very pragmatic thoughts, or thoughts about Nehemia or her surroundings or something else to distract her from what she's really thinking or feeling. This is one of those moments that I think is kind of obvious. It's distracting her from her anxiety, and it kind of sets up the tone for the rest of the evening.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to talk just kind of narratively, and we know Celaena is an unreliable narrator because she doesn't recognize her true feelings. And especially like in this set of chapters, her feelings are quite complex. Like, you know, we're not saying that she doesn't like Dorian. There's just a lot of other feelings happening.
Yeah.
And especially when you have this moment when she's staring at Kale, quote, he put it, the arrow, back in her lap. I wouldn't want to test the gods. She stared at him for a moment. Did he look different? Something had changed in his face. Like, she's seeing him differently, you know, like all of a sudden, all this like buddy. I mean, it's kind of funny because I feel like SJM's kind of trying to do a friends to lovers, but it's like enemies to guards to reluctant captive or whatever, allies to sort of friends to lovers.
Yeah, I completely agree. And we're going to see her look at Kale and see him differently a couple times throughout Yulmus, which go ahead.
Sorry.
Nope. No. Go ahead.
Damn it. I was like, it's just so funny that here she is seeing Kale differently for the very first time while she's all up in Dorian's
business
mouth.
Yeah. We're going to have to dive more into that. But since Yulmus started at the end of last episode, I just want to bring our attention back to the fact that when she woke up on Yulmus, Celaena thinks it's a time of like generosity, of kindness. And so she's definitely allowing her heart to be more open than maybe she is accustomed to. And I think that's why right now we're seeing her see Kale in a different light. We're seeing her pursue Dorian. She's just more willing to be open and vulnerable right now.
I mean, and this time, this day, these chapters, it's been really described of like, this is a different time. This is a different world. You know, she falls asleep. She calls it the land of sleep. There's a lot of references to dreams and things being dreamlike. This is not reality right now.
That's a great point.
Thank you. Now we are in chapter 38 and Celaena's getting ready for the Yulmus ball and she gets all dolled up. Quote, Philippa arranged the last strands of Celaena's hair neatly around her face, secured a mask over her eyes and nose, and placed a small crystal tiara on her head. Celaena couldn't help but feel, despite herself, like a princess. I love this because it's not implied that it's a good thing. It's not necessarily implied that it's a bad thing, but it's not like she's going around being, I am the most beautiful, regal person here. Especially the fact that you just had her sweating bullets while getting this arrow. And now here she is, like, actually looking and feeling like a princess, probably for the first time since being an actual princess, right?
Yeah.
And I think the reason why she's able to accept this is because she's wearing a mask and it's hiding her identity. So she's able to disassociate herself just enough to not actually be Aelin Galathinius.
I agree. And I think the wearing of a mask or the lack of a mask is going to be important for several of our characters, especially when we're in their point of view. So I'm completely on the same page with you. Focusing a little bit on this idea that this is Celaena feeling like a princess, that she's about to go to a ball. Quote, this would be her first ball where she wasn't there to kill someone. Now, that's so tragic when you know that Celaena is Aelin, who was a princess for whom balls would have been a very normal thing. So for her to be able to say, yeah, this is the first ball where I'm not going to kill someone is sad because it demonstrates a loss of her past life. Yeah. But it also explains kind of her bad attitude about being excluded during the festivities of Samhain and the ball for Yulmus, right? She's crashing this with no one's awareness. On one hand, she just wants to be a normal person. So that being said, though, trying to be normal, looking like a princess, it does beg the question, is she more vulnerable? Is she going looking for a fight? Right? She's going because she thinks Nehemia is going to cause trouble, but she's not necessarily equipped for the fight. Quote, this is the most beautiful dress I've ever worn, she admitted, her eyes filling with light. Now, I wondered if the eyes filling with light was a breadcrumb related to her fairness. Not sure. But again, I think it's just important that we recognize that This is a very special time. Celaena gets a little bit caught up in the moment, whether she wants to or not, whether she planned to or not. She is accessing something she never got, that she should have been entitled to, but she never got to experience.
Yeah, it's sad. Let's talk about the dress, though. Quote, "It was not pure white, but rather a grayish offset, and its wide skirts and bodice were encrusted with thousands of minuscule crystals that reminded Celaena of the surface of the sea. Her gray silk mask had been secured tightly against her face. It wasn't fashioned after anything, but the delicate crystals and pearl whorls had been crafted by a skilled hand." I love that she's wearing a gray dress because immediately we are seeing that things are murky. This is a blur between light and dark, which is a blur between truth and lies, as we've been talking about. And I also like that they make a point that she's covered in crystals. Now, I know she says that it's kind of like the sea, and, you know, that's beautiful. But what are crystals? Basically little tiny fancy glasses. What's the whole thing with temples and all of Adarlan? Glass. So here she is covered in glass, covered like in gray. We can get a clear sense that things are murky. So, of course, in the representation of everything, she would kiss Dorian and kind of forget that he is the king's son. She is in the king's glass, right? Like, she is covered by the glass of the king, essentially. And, you know, like, I'm not saying that she's like, you know, wearing the dress and is like, yes, I'm going to go and kiss him. These are metaphors, you know, like, we're just symbolism. We're just looking into it. And then she tucks in her makeshift knife in there. She's like, boom, weapon in her bodice.
Which, you know, we're going to realize later on a very flimsy weapon. But to your point, this dress is just another symbol of her assimilation, right? She's becoming one with the glass structures around her, despite all her talk from the beginning of the novel. Now, let's remember again why Celaena is going to this ball. It's to make sure Nehemia doesn't summon a monster to kill everyone. Quote, "You could win the hand of a king looking like that," said Philippa, "or perhaps a crown prince will do." I bring this up because Philippa is adding to this sense of quote unquote magic of Yulmus, right? She's distracting Celaena from Celaena's purpose of going to this ball to begin with. Celaena's supposed to be focused on keeping people safe, potentially stopping Nehemia from calling on a demon. But instead, Philippa is turning Celaena's attention toward seduction, towards using her feminine power, towards maybe getting with Dorian, right? It's influencing her in a direction that Celaena outwardly says was not her original intent.
So she leaves, kind of has to distract the guards, you know, her and Philippa, like, put a little, like, oh, we have to go, get her there, let's not question anything. And what helps with the guards and tricking them is the fact that she looks so nice and she looks so pretty. And, you know, they don't hide the fact that they admire how she looks. Quote, "You look nice," one of them, Ress, said shyly. "Off to the ball?" grinned another. "Save a dance for me, will you?" the third added. Not one of them questioned her. Celaena smiled, took Ress's arm as he extended it to her. She tried not to laugh when he puffed out his chest. I love her using, you know, her looks. I love her manipulating men. Big fan of that. More women should. I just want to clock this as a moment of us applauding Celaena for using the way she looks by things that are gifted to her, because she didn't go and buy this dress on her own, for using men. That's all. I don't judge her for this, right? Listener, do you judge her for this? No? Great. I'm going to put a pin on that.
And come circle back in a moment.
Circle back. What I do find to be super telling, though, is when Ress tells her, quote, "Have a lovely night, Miss Sardathian." He uses her, quote unquote, real name. And there's something about this dress, right? It's masking truth and lies. It's somewhere between both of them. You know, everyone's going to call her Lillian, Lady Lillian, for the rest of the night because that is what everyone knows her about. But here she is having a moment of her name coming into play, which is a name that's a lie, while wearing a dress that's like a princess, which is the truth.
Yeah.
It's a blur. It's a blur.
Yeah. And the guard that should be, you know, keeping her locked up, who knows her identity as Celaena Sardathian, is escorting her to the ball and is like super proud to be escorting her. I love just how confused this whole sequence is. The magic of Yulmus has confused everybody. Selena, Dorian, Kale, the guards, everybody.
Everyone's confused.
And I get it. I mean, if we equate Yulemas to Christmas, there is a magic about the day that you just are like, I'll ignore everything. It's a special day.
That magic is basically me on the couch having eaten too much and still eating too much.
Your stomach will expand. It's fine.
I can adjust.
So despite the magic that's going on right now, Selena does find herself in a situation that is unfamiliar to her and does make her uncomfortable. There's been enough clues that we know Selena's been betrayed by a friend before, and it's obvious based on her thought process around Nehemia that Selena doesn't want that betrayal to happen again. Despite all that, when she enters the ballroom, the grand hall, wherever it is, I think she's more focused on what Kale will think of how she looks when she sees him. Her anxiety in this moment is not about being betrayed by her friend. Quote, "A swarm of bees took flight in her stomach. She couldn't forget why she was here. She played this part in the past, but it had ended up in killing a stranger, not confronting a friend." We've talked about it before. We will talk about it a lot this episode. Selena's an unreliable narrator. Again, she's trying to focus on Nehemia. She's trying to focus on why she's here. But I think genuinely the narration is distracting us from what's causing those bees in Selena's stomach. I also want to point out that they're bees, they're not butterflies, right? We're accustomed to this idea of butterflies. Bees will sting, cause pain, and I think that's how she feels about this situation, but also maybe how she feels about Kale. When Selena enters the ballroom, we see Selena through Dorian's eyes. Quote, "Her dress was made of stars plucked from the sky, and the whorls of crystals in her gray mask glittered." Now, since Dorian's first ever point of view scene in chapter 6, he has always associated Selena with the night and stars. And I feel like since that intimate scene where he watched her look at the stars, there's something about him and seeing Selena that makes it feel like he views Selena as a possession. And so, for her to be almost plucked from the stars and brought to him as a gift is something that I think is a recurring theme between the two of them. There's a lot of stars, shooting stars associated between the two of them. That is not the case with Kale.
Yeah, I completely agree. So Dorian is very much associated with stars. We're going to get that association when he thinks about Selena and when Selena references him. So we're going to get more of that. And we've made it clear before, Selena's made it clear that she feels more comfortable in the night, right? Mm-hmm. She talks about being able to sneak around more. So immediately there's that connection and familiarity between the two, right? She feels comfortable with Dorian. I think that, we know she's comfortable with Kale, but there's an ease with Dorian that is not there with Kale. And, sometimes that ease can be confused as attraction, especially when the guy is attractive. Mm-hmm. But we're going to keep coming back to it. And I think, did he say it in this quote? Like he calls her a girl again? Like there's a certain disassociation that he has when observing Selena and his emotions with Selena too.
Do you want me to look to see if he calls her a girl?
No, we'll come to it. It's fine. Okay. There's other points I make. Even if that's not true in that one particular quote, I make points later.
Okay. Let's talk about how Dorian feels when he sees Selena. And I see Jac has notes that she wanted to put before my notes. So I'm going to read the quote and turn it over to her. Quote, "He didn't know why, but seeing her made him feel like a man. She was something out of a dream in which he was not a spoiled young prince, but a king."
Okay, the reason why I put my notes before yours is because it's funny. I was editing last week's episode, and in there I was like, we'll see how people feel about it. Some people don't like it. They don't like how hard we are on Dorian or Selena. So this is me coming in with the preface saying, okay, we are going to identify the fact that him looking at Selena inspires something within him where he's not a spoiled young prince, but a king, the ownership, the one who owns and rules everything. I recognize that people inspire others, sometimes the right partner helps you want to be a better person. All of that is true. There are nuances to situations. Welcome to the but. But one, this is literally what we're doing is to kind of get into the nitty gritty of it. 2, let's talk about the fact that he has never really talked to Selena or listed qualities of her that does not relate to him. You know, like it always kind of comes back to him. And, you know, he says something about, like, he talks about it like kind of being out of a dream, you know, that he is in a dream version of himself, a dream in which he was not a spoiled young prince. So all of this is not real, you know, and again, and earlier, like I said, she was, when Selena fell asleep at the temple, she entered the land of sleep. So they're both dreaming metaphorically. This isn't real for either of them. Plus, he's using like the type of man, not a prince, but like a king and a leader. And all of this is what he feels, but not actually. She doesn't actually inspire this from him. And he doesn't actually think about her very often. It's how he feels.
Right.
All right. Now let's go off.
Well, and just to further your point, he feels like a king, but nothing he does is kingly when he's inspired by her. Anyway, so when I read this quote, I see a power differential, right? I see the fact that Dorian ultimately possesses Selena, right? He got her out of jail. He's making her participate in this competition. And there's this pride when she's dressed up so beautiful and enters the room that he's like, proud of my possession. That's what makes him feel like a man.
That's my champion.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. I want to also, however, recognize that this idea of dream, land of sleep, and think about this in the context of Yulmus versus Sam Heughan. Sam Heughan, which was essentially it's like the Day of the Dead or the Night of the Dead. It's Halloween. The veil is thin. It's easier to talk to the dead. This is when we meet Elena, when we learn about Elena and Gavin. And we know that Elena looks a lot like Selena, right? I think on some level, SJM is also trying to make a connection, Selena and Dorian, with Elena and Gavin, right? Dorian feels like a king. Gavin was a king. He's inspired by Selena, who looks like Elena, who was married to Gavin. I think we're being gaslit into thinking that they're OTP because of this connection.
Yeah, we are being gaslit. And they look alike. They're wearing the same similar clothing. I have a note later, and I'm going to bring this up earlier. I'm going to bring it here now. When SJM first wrote this book, it was like in 2002 or something like that, like years prior. It was called Queen of Glass or something like that. Mm. Selena ends up marrying Dorian in that version. And then she reworked it. And then Selena got with Cale. He was OTP. And Rowan still exists for all these things. He was just kind of a mentor. And, you know, I'm not going to get into who she ends up with because we talk about, you know, well, all right, I will say slight spoiler, and I don't think that this is going to be, you know, anyone's going to be rocked by it, but she doesn't yet end up with Cale or Dorian, you know, and that's part of like, you know, what's so entertaining about this whole concept. But I think what we're really seeing here are some of these like original drafts where she does end up with Dorian and she does end up with Cale. And I can believe both sometimes because both of those past drafts are coming into play here, which is kind of nice because I think when an author is writing characters that they know are OTP, you kind of, you know, it's hard to make love triangles a thing because you're just like, no, but I want them to get together.
Right. Yeah. I was thinking about that in the context of conversations we've been having with our friends about their writing or their characters. Yeah. And they're always like, you have to believe in your heart and soul that your characters are OTP to be able to,
even if they're not,
in order for you to write it and write it convincingly. And that must be so hard because I'm always like, I just want to get to the good part where my two characters who love each other are supposed to love each other.
I mean, that's what I will always applaud ACOTAR because I was fooled.
Yeah, we all were.
Yeah. Amy, what's that?
An ad break.
We'll be right back.
Nice. As long as I've known Jac, she's wanted long hair. We have tried everything for her. Stop bleaching.
I will never stop bleaching, but it's true. I went through like 3 years without a haircut, and I'm trying to get that mermaid long hair. That's why I'm taking Nutrafol, and I have been consistent with my Nutrafol.
Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist-recommended hair growth supplement brand, trusted by over 1.5 million people. See thicker, stronger, faster-growing hair with less shedding in just 3 to 6 months with Nutrafol, which honestly is exactly what I need.
Everyone's root cause of hair thinning are different, so a one-size-fits-all approach to hair growth does not cut it. Nutrafol has multiple formulas that are tailored to give your hair what it needs to grow throughout different stages, such as postpartum and menopause, as well as for different lifestyles, such as plant-based diets.
Physician formulated with 100% drug-free ingredients, Nutrafol's supplements support visibly thicker, stronger hair from within by targeting root causes of thinning, including stress, hormones, aging, nutrition, lifestyle, and metabolism as they evolve throughout a woman's life. Start your hair growth journey with Nutrafol. For a limited time, Nutrafol is offering our listeners $10 off your first month's subscription and free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com and enter the promo code BOOKTALK.
Find out why over 4,500 healthcare professionals and stylists recommend Nutrafol for healthier hair. Visit Nutrafol.com, spelled Nutrafol.com, promo code BOOKTALK, BOOKTALK.
That's Nutrafol.com, promo code BOOKTALK.
We talk about a lot of different books on our podcast, Amy, but if there is one thing I just keep coming back to, it is romance.
Imagine not only reading romance, but getting swept away in every stolen glance and touch. That is what you're going to find on Galatea.
Galatea is a reading app where anyone craving a little me time can dive into a library of romance stories that leave you feeling recharged and fulfilled.
There are over 1,000 bestsellers to choose, from shifter romance to bad boy billionaires, forbidden love, werewolf alphas, slow burn fantasy, teen drama, and much, much more.
You know I love my werewolf alpha stories, and my billionaires, and my slow burns. Oh my god, all of it. Galatea is home to original series and standalone stories with an exclusive catalog of best-selling authors, with new chapters dropping daily, so there's always something new to explore.
Over 30 million people have fallen in love with reading on Galatea. Join now to indulge in stories that make you feel like yourself again.
Right now, Galatea is offering our listeners an extra 25% off on top of an already irresistible, affordable subscription when you go to Galatea.com/booktalk.
That's Galatea.com/booktalk, BOOKTALK, to indulge in unlimited stories for even less.
Head over to Galatea.com/booktalk and go read about some werewolves.
This episode is brought to you by Prime Video. In the small town of Holland, Michigan, nothing is ever what it seems. Behind the tulip festivals and pretty houses lay dark secrets that threaten to tear a marriage apart. Nicole Kidman stars in this darkly twisted thriller about a wife and mother whose quest to uncover her husband's secrets may get her more than she bargained for. Holland, streaming on Prime Video March 27th.
Uh-oh, the last cookie.
You can get a new box of cookies in as fast as an hour with Walmart Express Delivery.
Are you my guilty self-conscience?
No, I'm the voice offering you promo code EXPRESS for free delivery on your first order.
Hey, who ate my cookies?
You mean, these cookies?
Order now. Welcome to your Walmart. Promotion valid for first express delivery order. $50 minimum subject to availability. Restrictions apply.
Kale sees Selena enter the ball, and it's not surprising to any of us that he is upset because she is on display for everyone to see. Selena fights back, quote, "How can I be the king's champion if you don't trust me?" Actually, that was a question she really wanted to know the answer to. The irony of this moment, though, is that a handful of chapters ago, we learned from Kale's point of view that he actually does trust Selena against his better judgment. And that's why he gives up so quickly, right? He's like, oh, fine. Okay, stay. After this, Selena and Kale stay side by side, but Selena gets mad that he keeps getting in the way of anyone asking her to dance. And Selena focuses a lot on Dorian. Quote, "Dorian was dancing with a small brunette with outrageously large breasts that he took no pains to avoid glancing at every so often. hadn't he noticed her arrival? So, Jack, why does Selena care if she's also been developing feelings for Kale? Why does she get focused on Dorian?
It's easy to hyper focus on something when you don't want to think about another thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, you know, sometimes the phrase like the best way to get over someone is to get under someone else. Like it's, you know, sometimes you need to hyper focus on something. And I think hyper focusing on Dorian is easier.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at this charming, wonderful prince, hot prince who's dancing with a woman with outrageously large breasts, which I take offense to. All right. I just want to say, like, why are we saying this like it's a bad thing? Some of us can't help it.
Selena's just jealous.
And that's, yeah. And I get, which is like, I don't, again, let us note here. Selena's jealous that Dorian is dancing with another woman.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, as someone with large breasts, that sucks, but I don't judge her for that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you, listener? No. Let's put a pin in that. Do you know where I'm leading up? You know where I'm leading up to this.
I have no comment.
Okay.
I'm along for the ride.
But basically, yeah, I think that it's, you know, the feelings are there, and what she sees with Dorian, I believe, I think it more subconsciously, is a way to heal from Sam.
Mm.
What she might see with Kale is a way to move on from Sam. And there's a difference between healing and moving on. I think Dorian brings a Band-Aid healing. I think he's needed.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense. And he is the outwardly most handsome one. So again, it's easier for her to hyperfixate on him when she's just now starting to like see something in Kale that she finds attractive.
Yeah. Yeah. And then when Kale finally agrees to let Selena stay, he tells her, quote, "Well, try not to have too much fun," Kale said beside her, crossing his arms. Hiding her scowl, Selena crossed her arms as well and began her vigil, which is the funniest, like, you know, here she is in this gorgeous dress, just like sitting in the corner being like, fine, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to stare at everyone. And coming back, she's mirroring him. This is a reference, a throwback a little bit to them falling asleep at the temple. They are becoming mirrors of one another, which is one thing that we see in SJM's writing usually implies a level of intimacy.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and they say that when I think people's dating advice, it is like when you're interested in someone, your body language should mirror theirs, because then that's like one of the subconscious clues that they pick up on. So I see that reflected here too.
Should never trust my body language. Half the time my tummy hurts and I'm just trying to like comfort myself.
As the festivities go on around Selena, she begins to feel a little bit of shame. She gets in her head a lot because she's not distracting herself. Quote, "How had she even considered that Nehemia of all people would attack everyone?" Selena's face burned with shame beneath the mask. She didn't deserve to call herself a friend. Now, I feel like this goes back to the conversation about the mask and truth being able to be revealed because Selena is masked. It's hard for Selena to be self-aware, to acknowledge when she's wrong. And right now she's doubting herself and admitting a potential error. And I think she's only capable of doing that because she is masked in this moment. Nevertheless, Selena is struggling with trust and mistrust. Just like her dress reflects light and dark, Selena is struggling with truth and, you know, what is objective truth versus subjective truth right now, because her experience has taught her to be mistrustful, especially of female friends. Now, she's mostly going to doubt herself during the ball scene, but what we're going to see the next day is that Selena's going to go back and forth. I doubt myself and my doubt of Nehemia, or I doubt Nehemia. She could be bad, and if she is bad, I'm going to kill her for it. So yeah, Selena's confused. Mm-hmm. In order to not feel completely guilty for doubting Nehemia and for pissing off Kale, Selena has to keep convincing herself that she's doing the right thing by crashing the ball. Quote, "From this spot, she could also still make sure no feral beasts were about to rip into the crowd. But he didn't need to know that, he being Kale." This is what Selena's thinking internally. And I think it's just a cover for what comes out of her mouth next, right? This is her being rational. Like, I am here to make sure no beasts kill anybody. But then she turns to Kale and says, do you want to dance?
Yeah.
Which to me feels like what she really wants to do. It is her first ball. She gets to be just a girl. And Kale is the one she asks to dance.
Okay. I'm going to take a beat. We're going to look at yes, she asked him to dance, but where are they right now? So I want to kind of look at a clue. Quote, she glanced at him. Would you like to dance with me? He laughed. With you? No. She looked at the marble floor. Now, the last time we had a marble floor in a grand ballroom, it was where they did their tests, which was black and white checkered chessboard and we compared it to like a game, like the game of chess. And kind of what we are saying is that she's trying to fool herself, and this is kind of like a game of chess with them.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Is it the same location where they did their first sword fight?
I believe so, because she mentions one of the first. So I know whatever was the first one, but whenever they walked into their first location, they maybe it was the Arrow, but she was like, "Oh, this is a big enough ballroom that it was a big enough room that they probably have balls here."
I want to go look really fast because it's a relevant point I want to make. Yep. Okay. So
I was right.
You were right. I was also right. So this is where they practice for the first time, where they were fighting swords. And what was Selena doing when she first picked up a sword and was fighting Kale? She equated it to a dance. So in a lot of ways, they've already danced in this room before.
Yep.
And
that's great. Good job, SJM. Good job, us.
Yeah, amazing. But this time, where Kale was a willing participant, he is not willing anymore.
I know, it's rude.
And why might that be? It might be because of Dorian. It might be, now he's going to blame Parrington, but I think there's a lot going on right now.
Because he's got feelings.
He's got feelings.
Many of them.
Before, it was very black and white, and now it's not so black and white for him.
Yep. I mean, that's why she considers it cruel when he turns her down.
Yep. Kale says, quote, cruel? Selena, Parrington is just over there. I'm sure he's not happy about you being here, so I wouldn't risk drawing his attention any more than necessary. Coward. Kale's eyes softened. If he weren't here, I would have said yes. On one hand, that's kind of like a declaration of love coming from Kale.
I would have walked home with that like the entire night, being like, he does want me.
But what's happening is Kale is prioritizing the perception of others rather than prioritizing what Selena wants or feels.
Yes. I am also going to note that he expressed that he did want to dance with her.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm pointing that out because Dorian's response to dancing with her is kind of a fuckboy response.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one thing that we've continued to say about Kale is that, like, he's technically not wrong. You know, when he thinks that he shouldn't trust her, well, he's technically not wrong. Like, she does find an escape. She does, sneak about the castle. Is he wrong? Yeah. She's a good person. You don't have to worry about it. But everything that he's saying is technically not wrong. Should he dance with the beautiful girl who asked him to dance? Yes. But he's also technically not wrong because Parrington does notice and then starts planning her death. So it's like,
Yeah.
We get into how much Kale lets what others think of him when he tells Selena this, quote, I'm the captain of the guard. I'm not exactly a catch for any of them. There was some sorrow in his eyes, though it was well concealed. And this is when Selena is like, I'm sure all the ladies want to talk to you. And he was like, no, not me. And it's just so sad. Like, we're getting a lot more emotions from him than with vulnerability from him than we've seen this entire book. And rather than Selena hyperfixating on him, she's hyperfixating on Dorian.
Right. Well, because it's easier to understand extreme hotness than it is to understand
extreme emotions.
Well, humility, right?
Yeah.
Kale is humble. He feels like he's given up his chances for a lot of things. And this is when Selena has this reoccurring thought from Temple, but more obvious now. Quote, there was beauty in Kale's face and strength and honor and loyalty. She stopped hearing the crowd and her mouth became dry as he stared at her. How had she missed it for so long? And she talks about, I didn't include it in this quote, but talks about him being like a ray of sunlight. And what does sun have to, what does sun?
Lies.
But I do want to point out, even though this is the most overt time that Selena has called out her attraction to Kale, I don't think she's really missed it. This is just the only time she's been able to admit it to herself because she's wearing a mask.
You know, to your point that she's wearing a mask, I'm going to bring this back to the dress, right? It's gray. It's neither black or white. And the truth starts to bend with everything going on with her emotions and her feelings and what Kale's saying. But that mask, it's masking her face and her feelings. So she's not really putting herself out there. I'm not going to say Kale's out here being the most honest, vulnerable individual. He's still not really saying much. However, if you were to listen to what he's saying, he's, I would argue, putting himself a little bit more out there than her. Even though she asked him to dance, he's expressing that he would want to dance. He's expressing that no one would want to be with him. There's a little bit more emotional vulnerability that is happening on his side, but he's maskless, so he doesn't have to, like, he's not hiding as much until he's like hiding in the bushes watching her. But that's later.
Like a creep.
It's a romantic creep. But again, Selena starts to allow herself to get distracted by Dorian in order to mask her true feelings from herself and from the reader. Quote, Dorian was alarmingly handsome in his pewter tunic. One might say it matched her dress. And, you know, this is one of those like, and so they fit perfectly. We're going to have them fit wonderfully. And they're going to dance and only look at each other. And they're going to dance all night. But again, they're wearing gray. The truths are mixing. Things are half right. Are they a good pair? Yeah. Are they the right pair? No. And we get this moment when Selena sees Dorian and she gets really excited about him. And it says, quote, Dorian's gaze met hers and Selena's blood turned into shooting stars. I mean, when you think about Kale and the buzzing of bees, and then you think about Dorian with shooting stars as her blood, yeah, shooting stars sounds a lot nicer than, you know, a horde, like a whole thing of bees in your stomach. And so, yeah, she's going to feel more comfortable in his presence. She feels comfortable under the stars.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like these scenes, you're really seeing how much SJM is like, and now she ends up with him. No, she ends up with him.
Yeah.
And none of you bitches will know.
So I read Throne of Glass after I read ACOTAR and Crescent City. And if I hadn't already known who Selena ended up with because of Instagram, I would have assumed Aelin and Dorian ended up together, because this idea of blood turning to shooting stars, it's very Feyre Reese coded.
Yeah.
It's very Bryson Hunt coded. I can see why or how Dorian was originally the intended love interest, because
I struggled with it not knowing when I went into this. No, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I apologize. But I didn't know. Like back in my day, there was no fan art. There wasn't paying attention to fan art. But because I read it a long time ago, and I had no idea, and I struggled with it. I was like, what are you telling me she doesn't end up with the hot prince?
Because it's very coded for her to end up with him.
Yeah.
But we can see also at the same time how SJM has reworked it so that she's just gaslighting us.
And then the other half the time, I can see how she's making it so that Kale is OTP.
Yeah. Gaslit again.
Gaslit again. I get it enough from men. I don't need it from my authors.
No, I actually really appreciate it because
I do too.
Because it's, if you're an experienced reader, you pick up on these cues that authors leave. And so that she's doing the right thing by leaving these cues if she wants to fool us, which she does.
But the thing is, no one's an experienced reader when they're reading for the first time. You're just kind of on for the ride.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So let's continue this interaction between Dorian and Selena. Quote, Dorian caressed her back and she looked at him. Her heart jumped into a gallop and Kale dissolved from her thoughts like dew beneath the morning sun. She felt bad for forgetting him, but oh, she wanted Dorian. She couldn't deny it. She wanted him. So, first of all, Kale, again, associated with the morning sun, associated with, instead of lies, I'm just going to say the opposite of what she is.
Yes.
So, in this moment, I have to ask, is she forgetting Kale or is she punishing Kale for rejecting her from dancing, essentially?
Yeah. I take this as nothing to do with Kale and everything to do with Sam.
Okay.
I mean, like, yes, I think there's a little bit of punishment for Kale, you know, of like, oh, you don't want to dance with me? Well, guess what, bitch? Like, I'm going to dance with this guy over here. Samesies. If I could, I would. But, you know, I really want to look at the fact that she wants him. She does want this. Like, and then later on when she's kissing him, she goes, I like this. I like this. I like it. And it really feels like her being surprised about wanting something for the first time post Sam.
Yeah, makes sense.
Dorian, though, the dick of all dicks to poor Kale. Reminder, listener, like chapters and chapters ago, Kale was like, oh, she's not all that bad. And Dorian's like, great, I'm going to go hit on her now. And Dorian, at this point, straight up dismisses Kale to leave. Quote, just take the night off. It'll do you some good, he said over his shoulder, though the merriness faded from his tone. That is a dismissal. That is a, you can get out of here. I don't go away.
Mm-hmm.
Do not mess with my situation here. And I don't want to say that it's not that Dorian isn't attracted to Celaena, but we've only seen him attracted to her through the lens of himself, right? It was a rebellion to his mom. It was a way to become a man. It is a way to be separate and different than what he's used to. It's a way for him to be entertained and not bored. There's never a moment where it's like, wow, this vulnerable, strong, incredible woman is what I'm attracted to. Time and time again, Kale has said things like that.
Yeah.
Not that I'm attracted to, but he's recognized her pain, her struggles, her everything that she's gone through over time, not immediately. It's not like he got this to her right away. It took time. I think Dorian does like her. I think that there are emotions involved, but two things can be true. So they're getting ready to dance, right? And Celaena kind of gives Dorian a little bit of crap about so you're busy dancing with all those other women. And his response to that is, quote, I'm here, aren't I? Her heart tightened and she realized it wasn't the answer she'd been hoping for. What did she want from him? That is the most fuckboy well, I'm here, aren't I?
Yeah.
No. Be there when it mattered. Be there when you showed up.
Yeah.
When you're arrived right away.
Yeah.
Yeah,
for someone who's so into her, he's playing hard to get, which doesn't feel genuine.
I don't know if he's playing hard to get or if he just doesn't know how to give anything of himself. And I think sometimes we as people forget, kind of confuse the two of oh, well, if I keep pushing, he'll give, but it's not what we're getting from him. And, she's confused. She recognizes that she's confused of what does she want from him? Well, she's going to keep trying to find it, but she's not going to get it. We enter chapter 39 and we are in Dorian's point of view. Quote, he was lost in a world of which he'd always dreamed. This is when he's dancing with Celaena. Again, it's a dream. This isn't real.
Yeah.
And a world of which he'd always dreamed. That world is not a world where he's with Celaena. That world is a world where he is a man and a king.
And free of his mother and father. And part of that is because Celaena is a symbol of rebellion and not someone that his mother would necessarily pick for him. Not that his mother really knows who she is at this point. There's this moment, though, when they're dancing that Celaena refuses to send her puppy that Dorian gifted to her to the kennels while she's at the ball. Instead, she's like, it's in my bedroom. Dorian reacts, and I think it's in response to the kindness of her related to the puppy, or because she's the puppy. I don't know. Quote, he suddenly felt the urge to kiss her hard upon the mouth. But what he felt, it could never be real, because once the ball was over, she would go back to being an assassin and he would still be a prince. Dorian swallowed hard. For tonight, though, it's really giving Cinderella vibes now of when the clock strikes midnight, this will all be over. Again, they're seduced by the magic of Yulmus. They're confused. And in my mind, they are still play acting the part of Elena and Gavin, this prince and princess, this king and queen, and, this court that they lord over.
Yeah. I mean, even if you don't know at this point that she's the princess of Terrasen, you do know she's from that country. And you do know that Elena was sent from that country to this kingdom.
Right.
So, there's still a connection. And I agree. I think there's a lot that's happening there. Now, my point of view when it comes to the dog, statement, I think that it's something where she has concerns for the dog and, he's had concerns for the dog. And like we said, she is the dog. So it's kind of oh, you care about the same thing I care about, which is you. That's good. There's people are like, what the fuck are you talking about? In our minds, I can tell this makes sense. In other people's minds, I can understand why it's confusing. But the core of it is that they are still in this dream-like state.
I think your point, though, is spot on. The fact that she's expressing care and concern about something he cares about as well, right? That makes him feel like he's connected to her instead of being like, this is a normal human thing to do. Like, this is what empathy means.
Well, I don't know. You don't get bonus points for liking animals. Okay. Anyway, but coming back to this, I would like to double down. It is Celaena expressing an interest in something that he gave her and something that interests him. Not, I learned this about you. Not, oh, you taught me something interesting.
Yep.
It's still coming back to him.
Yep. Absolutely.
Like and not that that's a bad thing. Like this guy, oh, listeners, guess what? I was asked out on a date. But he was like, oh, like, you want to go to a bookstore? And I was like, hard to flutter. But I'm like, oh, you are saying, you're repeating what I said of what I like. Which is fair. Like, I'm Dorian. That's okay.
Now, off on the side, Chaol is watching Dorian and Celaena dance together, and he just really can't be honest with himself. And remember, he's not wearing a mask, so he's not really free to be honest. And he was being vulnerable before, and Celaena kind of shot him down. Dorian took her away. The boy's confused. So despite what he said about he would have danced with her, quote, he wouldn't have danced with her anyway. And he was glad he hadn't worked up the nerve to ask her, not after seeing the color that Duke Barrington's face turned upon discovering the pair. I bring this up because in the first half of the novel, Chaol's point of view was like a compass. It righted our understanding of the world and of Celaena because his point of view was the most honest point of view. Now we're learning he has also become an unreliable narrator. His feelings are getting in the way of him being able to be honest. And that's important for the rest of this book and the books to come.
Yeah. There is a fun little moment, though, with Otho. As Otho talks to Chaol and his breath reeks of wine, quote, you didn't dine with us anymore. I stopped dining at your table 3 years ago, Otho. You should come back. We miss your conversation. It was a lie. Otho only wanted information about the foreign young lady. I think this is a good moment of coming back to food is power and information. So we've talked a lot in other seasons. Go back to our ACOTAR season that food is power. Power is information. Dinner is a currency of both power and information. And that's not just book world. I'd argue that's world.
Yeah.
You know, like you're sitting at dinner, you're talking, suddenly things get a lot more honest there and you're hearing a lot more truths. Yeah, I sorry, I just had a flashback. We went to Romantasy Con. I love the dinners that we had. The best. Otho pushes on if Dorian is with Celaena, and Chaol says, quote, the Lady Lillian belongs to herself and no one else. She's not with him? No. How do you not immediately look at this and say, he's the one who gets her more?
Mm-hmm.
Dorian has yet to say anything about Celaena that is not in regards or a reflection of himself.
Mm-hmm.
Chaol flat out says this, like she belongs to herself. He gets her. He understands that. And this is another freaking hint where SJM's gaslighting us, being like, he's endgame. I can see her writing this thinking this is the man she ends up with.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that too. But another thing that strikes me is that Chaol believes that she belongs to herself and no one else. Is that in conflict with his own desire, potentially, for her to belong to him, right? Or that they are both unwilling to give each other to each other or give themselves to each other. So, yeah, it could mean all sorts of things. It's not until Otho remarks, though, that Dorian is obviously in love with Celaena that Chaol notices what is truly happening between the pair. Quote, Dorian's expression was full of something. Joy? Wonder? His shoulders were straight, his back erect. He looked like a man, like a king. So Dorian and Chaol are having the same thoughts about Dorian. And none of it is about Celaena. Because at the end of the day, Celaena has changed both men, just like they've changed her, right? Being together has influenced change in each of these characters. However, Cale also is quick to note, quote, but Selena wasn't in love with Dorian. Otho hadn't said that. He had seen no attachment on her part, and Selena would never be that stupid. It was Dorian who was the fool. Dorian who would have his heart broken if he did actually love her. Unable to look at his friend any longer, the captain of the guard left the ball. So I have a couple notes here. First of all, at the very end, Cale has lost his identity. It is lost to his title by the end of this sequence, and it feels like he's slipping it away into the crowd. But it's also a reminder that he's not a prince. He's not the one that Selena's paying attention to right now. He also potentially, by losing his identity, is emotionally disassociating his own feelings because he's also at risk of being hurt. I love that Cale thinks that Dorian's the one who's stupid and will experience heartbreak. I've
been waiting for you to say this. I'm like sitting here. I'm like, let me talk. Go do it. Say it so I can jump on.
You go.
No, you say it. You say it. And I'll have feelings.
It's a great role reversal because it's usually expected that the woman is going to be the one with her heart broken.
I love this because he's not talking about Dorian. He's an unreliable narrator. You know, Amy talked about this is the first time we can see him truly being unreliable. And, you know, I'm going to read the quote again. And this is him talking about himself. But she wasn't in love with him, being Cale. Otho hadn't said that. He had seen no attachment on her part to Cale. Selena would never be that stupid to Cale. It was Dorian who was the fool, Dorian who who would have his heart broken if he did actually love her. He's talking about himself. He's not talking about Dorian. He's, you know, projecting onto Dorian. Now, he's not wrong, but he's talking about himself. It's so sad. I love how sad this area is.
It's so sad.
Yeah. All right. Let me adjust myself because we're about to talk about Kaltain. To my point of listeners not being thrilled with some of the things that we're saying, particularly of which is Kaltain. And a lot of, there's been a fair amount they think I'm too easy on her, that I'm viewing her with a soft-hearted lens. And I would like to make a point that I think the only true Kaltain we get is in the very first handful of chapters. After that, she starts to get possessed, and we are no longer dealing with a real Kaltain. And I think that my original question of would her story had gone differently if Selena wasn't mean to her, I think that question still stands. So now, it's like my note is I'm doubling down on this. But I do ask you, dear listener, to hear us out. Kaltain admires her own outfit. Quote, it was all a gift from Parrington, of course, along with the jewelry that decorated much of her neck and arms. It was certainly not the dull, drab mess of crystal that conniving harlot wore. All right, so people might look at this and be like, look, she's a bitch. Like, can't you see? Literally, Selena was gifted all of her clothes too. She didn't go out and earn this. That was all gifted to her. 2, she's out there watching a woman dance with Dorian, judging her. Just like Selena judged that woman was outrageously large boobs. Mm-hmm. Now you might say Selena didn't call her a harlot. Selena didn't, tear down her dress. True. Absolutely all true. And that's probably Kaltain's petty, shitty side of her, to be able to actually try to find things to knock down Selena. However, you can't tell me that they're not doing similar shit, guys. They're very similar. Kaltain then thinks about Parrington and, quote, she wondered if she could bear the repulsion of kissing him. She could always keep refusing, just as she had for the past month. But when he was this drunk, ... How does anyone read this and not feel absolutely heartbroken and see how tragic her story is? This is not consent. Mm-hmm. Her father arranged this marriage. She is being forced onto this man. She is in a non-consensual engagement right now. And does she get riches and nice things from him? Yes. Does she try to find the silver lining? Sure. How are we not looking at this and being like, yeah, I'd want to get the hell out of there. I don't want to be forced every single night. That is not consent. Things that aren't consent is rape. So it's just, you didn't watch Nosferatu, did you?
I did not.
It's basically Dracula, but the difference is that I'm going to spoil this. The very end, the main Lily Rose Depp, she basically has sex with Nosferatu until he dies, right? And people are like, oh, this is profound, which is, I'm like, she was essentially raped to death. She didn't want to be with him. She sacrificed her body. And again, that's not consent. That was not an empowering moment for her. That was her using her body and giving something up of herself to sacrifice, and her being sexually assaulted to the very end saves everyone. All these men. Fucking stupid movie. Sorry. I'm back.
Issues.
Me? Or
No.
world?
The world.
The world, yes. So we do get Kaltain, who is jealous of Selena and Dorian, but we then get this moment. And I know we'll probably flag a lot of this in the breadcrumbs, but like, I am going to ride this Kaltain train until the bitter end, until she does something outrageously inappropriate. And here is this quote. A precipice opened before her. Her head gave a brief, faint throb of pain. There was no other options now. Lillian had to be eliminated. When her head hurts, that is the possession happening. When she has a headache, when there's these sudden thoughts like that, that is a possession. That is not her thoughts. Even if there is a kernel of her dislike of Selena, it is blown up to the 1,000,000th degree. We cannot judge her for those moments, because she also doesn't have any friends to be like, hey, bestie, maybe you shouldn't want to kill people.
Yeah, maybe that's not normal.
Yeah. Hey, girly pop.
No, I completely agree with you. And it's arguable, maybe we've never really known the true Kaltain, because she had a headache when we first saw her from Selena's point of view.
Yeah, you did. Can I just throw something at you through the computer? You're right. We've never known the true Kaltain. She was possessed from the beginning. Fuck!
You okay?
No, I'm not. But you may continue. You just made a really good point. You should fear for yourself tomorrow.
Thank you for listening to part 1 of this week's episode of Book Talk for Book Talk with Jac and Amy. Stick around for part 2, which airs on Thursday.
We encourage you to rate and subscribe to our show on your preferred podcast listening platform. We would also love to hear your thoughts based on today's conversation. You can submit your comments to our forum at booktalkforbooktalk.com to have a chance to have your feedback discussed during a future mini episode or a Patreon exclusive episode.
If you're enjoying the podcast, please visit our website, booktalkforbooktalk.com, to view our latest merch and learn about supporting the show through Patreon or Venmo. You can follow us on TikTok, Instagram, or YouTube at the handle Book Talk for Book Talk. Bye.
Bye.
Lovely.
I feel like I delivered that so well.
You did a fabulous job.
Other than the not saying words correctly part.
Ready?
Did I ask you already? And did you say yes? But will you help me move my dad's ashes into his urn once it's time?
You have not asked me, but sure.
Yeah, I'm going to get him an urn, after 20 plus years, he finally gets an urn. And my mom, I was like, what do I do with them? My mom's like, you just put them in. And I was like,
because they're in a bag, right?
Yeah, but gross.
Yeah.
She's like, they're ashes. And I'm like, she was like, she did it with grandma and grandpa. And I'm like, I don't.
Technically, it's like hazardous.
Well, we're going to wear masks.
Right. And gloves.
And
do it in the bathroom where it's easy to bleach if we need to.
Yeah. We'll do it in my bathroom.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Just know that that's probably in your future in the next couple months, is to help me.
Got it.
Best friends help put dads in urns after
I can do
years.
I can do that.
The search for truth never ends. Introducing June's Journey, a hidden object mobile game with a captivating story. Connect with friends, explore the roaring 20s, and enjoy thrilling activities and challenges while supporting environmental causes. After 7 years, the adventure continues with our immersive travels feature. Explore distant cultures and engage in exciting experiences. There's always something new to discover. Are you ready? Download June's Journey now on Android or iOS.
We talk about a lot of different books on our podcast, Amy, but if there is one thing I just keep coming back to, it is romance.
Imagine not only reading romance, but getting swept away in every stolen glance and touch. That is what you're going to find on Galatea.
Galatea is a reading app where anyone craving a little me time can dive into a library of romance stories that leave you feeling recharged and fulfilled.
There are over 1,000 bestsellers to choose, from shifter romance to bad boy billionaires, forbidden love, werewolf alphas, slow burn fantasy, teen drama, and much, much more.
You know I love my werewolf alpha stories, and my billionaires, and my slow burns. Oh my god, all of it. Galatea is home to original series and standalone stories with an exclusive catalog of best-selling authors, with new chapters dropping daily, so there's always something new to explore.
Over 30 million people have fallen in love with reading on Galatea. Join now to indulge in stories that make you feel like yourself again.
Right now, Galatea is offering our listeners an extra 25% off on top of an already irresistible, affordable subscription when you go to galatea.com/booktalk.
That's GALATEA.com/booktalk, BOOKTALK, to indulge in unlimited stories for even less.
Head over to galatea.com/booktalk and go read about some werewolves.